The penthouse overlooked Manhattan like a throne over an empire. Gabrielle Monroe stood in the doorway of what used to be her bedroom, her Louis Vuitton suitcase packed, her wedding ring balanced on the edge of the marble kitchen counter. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see her husband, Derek Whitmore, on the balcony, champagne in hand, his other arm wrapped around Sienna Vale's waist. They were celebrating. He thought he'd just been promoted to CEO of Whitmore and Associates, the company he believed his vision had built. He had no idea that the woman he'd just asked to leave, the one he'd called dead weight an hour ago, owned every brick, every contract, every dollar that flowed through that building. Gabrielle adjusted the collar of her coat, her twins asleep in their carriers by her feet. Maya and Zara, 18 months old, deserved better than a father who forgot they existed the moment a younger woman smiled at him. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream. She simply placed the ring down with a soft click that echoed louder than any goodbye. As the elevator descended, she whispered to herself, "You wanted to see what you built without me, Derek. Let's see how long it stands." By morning, his world would begin to crumble, but he wouldn't know why. Not yet. 3 years earlier, Gabrielle had met Derek Whitmore in the most unremarkable way possible, at a coffee shop in Brooklyn where the espresso was too bitter and the tables wobbled. She'd been there reviewing acquisition reports for a subsidiary of Monroe Global Holdings, the empire her grandmother had built from nothing but grit and vision. He'd spilled his coffee, reaching for the last blueberry muffin at the same moment she did. "I'm so sorry," he'd said, grabbing napkins with genuinely apologetic eyes. "I have a presentation in 20 minutes and I'm running on 3 hours of sleep." She'd smiled, charmed by his rumpled suit and honest nervousness. "MBA program? Columbia, final semester." He'd grinned, and in that moment, he'd been beautiful in his ambition, hungry but humble, driven but kind. "I'm Derek." "Bree," she'd said, using the nickname only her grandmother called her. Not Gabrielle Monroe, heiress to billions, just Bree, a woman who wanted to know if someone could love her without a balance sheet attached. They'd talked for 2 hours. He'd missed his presentation. She'd missed her meeting. By the end of the month, they were inseparable. Derek had big dreams, marketing strategies that could revolutionize brand positioning, ideas about customer psychology that actually impressed her. He worked 80-hour weeks at a startup that paid him in equity and hope. She worked from home, managing what he thought were freelance consulting gigs. He never asked too many questions. She never offered too many answers. When her grandmother passed away 6 months into their relationship, Gabrielle had held the sealed letter with trembling hands. The lawyer's voice had been gentle but firm. "Your inheritance is substantial, Miss Monroe, but per your grandmother's wishes, it remains confidential for 5 years from the date of her passing. She wanted you to know who truly loved you when you appeared to have nothing." The inheritance structure was ingenious. While Gabrielle couldn't publicly claim her ownership stake or sit on the board for 5 years, a trust fund ensured she was never financially dependent. She received a comfortable annual stipend, enough to live modestly, fund her consulting work, and maintain independence, but nothing that would raise suspicions. Derek knew she had family money, but assumed it was a small trust fund, maybe $50,000 a year. He had no idea that the consulting firm she ran from their apartment, Monroe Strategic Solutions, was actually a fully funded subsidiary billing clients at rates that would have shocked him. She'd simply never deposited those payments into their joint account. That had been 5 years and 3 months ago. Gabrielle had been 27 then, freshly in love, believing Derek was the partner her grandmother had hoped she'd find. She'd married him 8 months after the funeral, had the twins at 29, and now, at 32, the waiting period was finally over. Gabrielle had understood immediately. Her grandmother, Loretta Monroe, had been dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed by men who'd wanted her wealth but not her wisdom. She'd built Monroe Global Holdings in the 1970s when banks wouldn't give black women business loans, when doors were closed and locked and bolted. "Power," her grandmother had written in her final letter, "isn't about being seen. It's about what remains when you step back. Test the soil before you plant your roots, baby girl. See who waters you when they think you're just a seed." So Gabrielle had waited. She'd married Derek in a small ceremony at City Hall. She'd supported his career pivot into brand strategy. When he'd landed an interview at what he didn't know was a Monroe Global subsidiary, she'd made a single phone call, not to guarantee the job, just to ensure he'd be evaluated fairly. He'd gotten the position on merit. She'd been proud. The twins had arrived 2 years into their marriage. Maya with her father's light eyes, Zara with her mother's warm brown skin and knowing gaze. Derek had held them in the hospital with tears streaming down his face, whispering promises about the life he'd build for them. For a while, he'd kept those promises. But ambition, Gabrielle learned, was a seed that could grow into something beautiful or something that choked out everything else. Derek's rise at the company had been meteoric. Junior strategist to senior director in 18 months. He'd been good at his job. She wouldn't have helped someone incompetent. But every major campaign he'd pitched had been workshopped at their kitchen table. Every client relationship he'd naturally developed had been facilitated by her quiet word to the right person. She'd been his invisible foundation. And somewhere along the climb, he'd started believing he'd done it all himself. The shift had been subtle at first, forgetting to thank her in his award acceptance speech, brushing off her strategic suggestions with a patronizing, "That's cute, babe, but let me handle the business stuff." Spending later nights at the office, coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. The twins had just turned one when she'd found the first text message. "Can't stop thinking about you," Sienna Vale had written, accompanied by a photo that left nothing to the imagination. Gabrielle had stared at the screen, her daughters babbling in their playpen behind her, and felt something inside her calcify. Not break. Breaking implied there was still something soft to shatter. This was different. This was steel forming where trust used to live. She'd hired a private investigator, not out of paranoia, but precision. If she was going to make a decision, she needed complete information. The report had arrived 3 weeks later. 6 months of infidelity, luxury hotel rooms billed to company cards she technically owned, jewelry purchased from accounts she'd never touched, Sienna Vale, 26, lifestyle influencer, 340,000 Instagram followers, zero substance beneath the filtered photos. Derek had traded a partnership for a performance. The final straw had come on a Tuesday evening. She'd spent the day managing a crisis for one of Monroe Global's tech acquisitions while simultaneously entertaining the twins, who were teething and miserable. Derek had come home at midnight, barely glanced at his sleeping daughters, and announced, "I'm being considered for CEO of our division. This is everything I've worked for." "We've worked for," she'd corrected gently. He'd laughed, actually laughed. "Babe, you're a great mom, but let's be real. You've never built anything yourself. This is my career." The words had landed like a slap. She'd excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door, and finally opened the second letter her grandmother's lawyer had been instructed to deliver on the twins' first birthday. "By now," it read, "you know if he's worthy. Trust your gut, baby girl. And remember, you didn't inherit wealth. You inherited a legacy. Protect it." That night, Gabrielle had made her decision. The 5-year waiting period had ended 3 months ago. She'd met with her lawyers, her financial advisors, and the board of Monroe Global Holdings. The paperwork had been filed. The structures had been put in place. She owned 62% of the conglomerate outright, including the independent marketing firm where Derek worked. She'd waited for the right moment to reveal herself. She'd thought maybe she'd do it gently, give him a chance to understand what he'd taken for granted. But then tonight had happened. She'd come home early from a meeting with her Radiance Collective team, the wellness platform she was building, specifically for women who'd been made invisible. The twins had been with her mother for the afternoon. She'd been planning to surprise Derek with dinner. Instead, she'd walked into her penthouse to find him and Sienna toasting with her vintage champagne. "To freedom," Derek had said, kissing Sienna's neck. "Once the divorce is final, we can finally live the life we deserve." Sienna had giggled. "Does she know yet?" "I'm telling her tonight. She'll cry, probably beg me to stay, but honestly, I'm done playing house with someone who doesn't understand ambition." Gabrielle had stood in the hallway, her keys still in her hand, and felt absolutely nothing. No tears, no rage, just clarity so sharp it could cut diamonds. She'd walked into the living room. They'd jumped apart like teenagers caught by parents. "Bree, Derek had started, his face flushing. Don't, she'd held up a hand. I'll make this simple. I'm leaving, tonight. The twins and I will be gone within the hour. Sienna had smirked, thinking she'd won. Derek had actually looked relieved. Look, I didn't want it to happen this way, but yeah, maybe this is for the best. You can stay in the apartment until we figure out the details. No, Gabriel had said calmly. You can stay. For now. He'd blinked, confused by her composure. Bree, I know this is hard, but you'll be okay. You're strong. You'll find someone who what? She'd interrupted, her voice still soft, but edged with something he'd never heard before. Who appreciates me, who sees me, who doesn't mistake my support for subservience. I just think, he'd fumbled, you need someone more. Your speed. Someone who doesn't need as much from a partner. There it was. The final insult dressed up as concern. You're right, she'd said, moving toward the bedroom. I do need someone different, someone who knows the difference between building an empire and borrowing one. She'd packed while they had whispered in the living room, their celebration muted but not stopped. She'd gathered the twins' essentials, her important documents, and the diamond bracelet her grandmother had given her on her wedding day. For when you remember who you are, the note tucked inside had read. Now, standing in the elevator as it descended from the penthouse to the ground floor, Gabrielle finally let herself breathe. The twins stirred in their carriers, Maya's tiny fist reaching for her mother's finger. I know, baby girl, Gabrielle whispered. We're going home. Not to the penthouse that had become a prison of pretense, home to herself, to the power she'd kept hidden, to the legacy her grandmother had entrusted her to protect. Her phone buzzed, a text from her lawyer. Everything's in place, just say the word. She typed back, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. board meeting, full reveal. Another text, this one from Julian Cross, the architect her grandmother had mentored like a son, the man who'd sat at their family dinners and absorbed Loretta's wisdom, about business and character. He'd been appointed to the board as independent consultant 3 months ago, though Gabrielle knew his real purpose, to conduct a quiet audit and ensure everything was ready for her emergence. His text was simple. You sure about this? She smiled, the first genuine smile in months. Never been more sure of anything. The cab driver helped her load the twins into the car seat she'd had delivered earlier. As they pulled away from the building, Gabrielle glanced back one final time. Up on the balcony, she could see Derek and Sienna laughing, champagne glasses raised against the Manhattan skyline. Let them celebrate, she thought. By this time tomorrow, he'll understand what he really owned. Nothing but the illusion I allowed him to believe. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Baby girl, some men need to lose everything before they can see anything clearly. Don't confuse mercy with weakness. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the truth. Goodbye, Derek, she whispered as the cab merged into traffic. Enjoy your last night of ignorance. The apartment Gabrielle had secured weeks ago was in Brooklyn, a quiet brownstone far from the glittering excess of Manhattan's elite. It had good light, hardwood floors, and enough space for the twins to grow without the suffocating pretense of wealth on display. She settled Maya and Zara in their new nursery. Soft yellow walls, white furniture she'd assembled herself, stuffed animals that hadn't been chosen by an interior designer, but by her own hands in a small toy shop in Park Slope. This was real. This was hers. After the twins were asleep, Gabrielle sat at the small kitchen table and opened her laptop. The Monroe Global Holdings board portal loaded, her access level displayed clearly. Majority shareholder and CEO. She pulled up Derek's employee file. Every promotion, every bonus, every glowing review, all approved through channels that eventually led back to her anonymous authority. She'd never directly intervened, but she'd ensured his talent was noticed, his projects were funded, his ideas were given room to flourish. She'd built the greenhouse. He'd just been a plant inside it, mistaking shelter for sunlight. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Tomorrow would change everything. The revelation would be public, devastating, complete. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of grief, not for the marriage that had died, but for the man she'd thought she'd married. He'd been real once, she was sure of it, but ambition had poisoned him. Or maybe it had just revealed who he'd always been beneath the humble exterior. Her phone rang. Her mother's name flashed across the screen. "Baby, you okay?" Her mother's voice was warm, concerned, knowing. "I am, Mama. The twins are asleep. We're safe." "And tomorrow?" Gabrielle looked out the window at the Brooklyn streets, so different from the penthouse view. "Tomorrow I stop hiding." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Your grandmother would be proud, not of the revenge, but of you finally standing in your truth." "It's not revenge," Gabrielle said softly. "It's just removing the scaffolding. If what he built was real, it'll stand. If it wasn't, then it deserves to fall," her mother finished. "I love you, baby girl. You're stronger than you know." After they hung up, Gabrielle pulled out the final letter her grandmother had left, the one marked, "Open the night before you reclaim your throne." The handwriting was shaky but strong, written in the last weeks of Loretta Monroe's life. "My dearest Bree, if you're reading this, you've made your choice. Whatever it is, I trust it. You have my mind, my heart, and my steel spine. Remember, power that announces itself is just noise. Real power moves in silence until it's time to speak, and when it speaks, the world has no choice but to listen. You were never his wife. You were his foundation. And foundations don't crumble when buildings fall. They remain, ready to support something worth building. Don't let bitterness win. Let wisdom lead. Show him mercy if you can, but never at the cost of your own peace. The empire is yours, but more importantly, your life is yours. Build something that makes you happy, not just something that makes you powerful." "I love you beyond measure," Grandma Loretta Gabrielle folded the letter carefully, tears finally falling, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She'd been tested, she'd been patient, and now it was time. She opened a new document and began typing the speech she'd deliver tomorrow, not with cruelty, but with clarity, not with vengeance, but with truth. "Good morning," she wrote. "My name is Gabrielle Monroe, and I'm the majority shareholder and CEO of Monroe Global Holdings. Some of you know me as Derek Whitmore's wife, but what you don't know is that you've been working for me all along." Outside, the city hummed with millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. But tomorrow, only one would matter. The invisible woman was about to step into the light, and the man who'd dismissed her was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. You can't build an empire on borrowed ground. If you've felt overlooked, underestimated, or invisible in your own life, you're not alone. Bree's journey is just beginning, and so is yours. What happens when the truth finally comes to light? Stay with us to find out. Chapter 2. Derek Whitmore woke up to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and Sienna's arm draped across his chest. For the first time in months, he felt free. No more pretending, no more guilt, no more playing house with a woman who didn't understand the altitude he was meant to reach. He checked his phone. 7:47 a.m. The board meeting was at 9, his coronation essentially. By noon, he'd officially be CEO of the marketing division with a corner office and the respect he'd earned. Sienna stirred beside him, her blonde hair spilling across the pillow like something from a magazine shoot. "Morning, Mr. CEO," she purred. He grinned. "Not official yet. But it will be." She traced a finger down his chest. "And then we can finally live the life we deserve. No more hiding. No more boring wife and screaming babies." Something in her tone made him pause, the casual cruelty toward Maya and Zara, but he brushed it aside. Sienna was young. She'd mature. Besides, he'd barely seen his daughters in weeks. They were better off with Bree anyway. She was good at that domestic stuff. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Conference room A, 9 a.m. sharp. Full board attendance required." Full board? That was unusual for a divisional promotion. Maybe they were making a bigger deal of it than he'd thought. He showered, dressed in his best Tom Ford suit, the one Bree had bought him for his birthday last year, though he'd forgotten that detail, and kissed Sienna goodbye. "Celebrate with me tonight?" he asked. "Champagne at per se," she replied, "on your new CEO salary." He laughed, feeling invincible. The drive to Monroe Tower in Midtown took 20 minutes. He didn't notice that the building's name had changed overnight, or that the logo in the lobby was subtly different. He was too busy rehearsing his acceptance speech. In the elevator, he ran into Marcus Chen, the CFO, who looked uncharacteristically tense. "Big day," Derek said cheerfully. Marcus gave him an odd look. "You could say that." "Everything okay?" "You'll see," Marcus replied cryptically, exiting on the executive floor. Derek frowned but shook it off. Maybe Marcus was just stressed about quarterly reports. The conference room was already full when he arrived. The entire board sat around the massive mahogany table, 12 people who controlled billions in assets. At the head of the table sat an empty chair, reserved for the CEO who was supposedly retiring. But there was something else unusual. A 13th chair, positioned at the opposite end of the table from the CEO's seat. And sitting in it, reviewing documents with calm precision, was a man Derek had never seen before. He was late 30s, African-American, with an architectural elegance to his features and wire-rimmed glasses that suggested intelligence without pretension. His charcoal suit was impeccable, but understated. "Who's that?" Derek whispered to his colleague, Jennifer, from Brand Strategy. "Julian Cross," she whispered back. "New board consultant, brought in 3 months ago by the majority shareholder." Derek's stomach tightened. "I thought the shares were distributed among the board members." Jennifer shook her head. "Apparently not. There's been a silent majority shareholder all along. Nobody knows who." Before Derek could process this, the room fell silent. The door opened, and Gabrielle Monroe walked in. She wore a tailored black suit that looked both powerful and effortless, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, diamond studs in her ears, the ones her grandmother had given her. She carried a leather portfolio and moved with the kind of quiet authority that made everyone instinctively sit straighter. Derek's brain short-circuited. "Bree? What are you?" She didn't look at him. She walked directly to the empty chair at the head of the table, the CEO's chair, and set down her portfolio. Julian Cross stood, offering his hand. "Miss Monroe." She shook it with a slight smile. "Thank you for your patience, Mr. Cross." Derek looked around wildly. No one else seemed confused. In fact, everyone was watching Gabrielle with expressions ranging from curiosity to respect. "I don't understand," Derek said, his voice cracking slightly. "Bree, what are you doing here?" Finally, she looked at him. Her gaze was steady, calm, and completely devoid of the warmth he'd taken for granted for years. "My name," she said quietly, "is Gabrielle Monroe, and I'm here because this is my company." The words hung in the air like a verdict. "That's not funny," Derek said, forcing a laugh. "Can someone explain what's going on?" Marcus Chen cleared his throat. "Derek, perhaps you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want to know why my ex-wife, is crashing my promotion meeting." "It's not your promotion meeting," Gabrielle said simply. She opened her portfolio and began distributing documents around the table. "It's an emergency board meeting I called to address several issues, including significant irregularities in company spending and the upcoming transition of executive leadership." Derek grabbed one of the documents as it passed him. His eyes scanned the header, Monroe Global Holdings, Shareholder Distribution Report. There, in black and white, Gabrielle A. Monroe, 62% majority shareholder. His hands started shaking. "This is a joke. This has to be a forgery." "It's not," Julian Cross said calmly. "I've spent the last 3 months conducting an independent audit of the company's ownership structure. Everything is legally sound and has been since Miss Monroe inherited the shares from her grandmother, Loretta Monroe, 5 years ago." Derek's mind was reeling. Loretta Monroe. He'd met Bree's grandmother once, briefly, at their tiny wedding. A dignified older woman who'd seemed kind but unremarkable. He'd had no idea. "You've been lying to me," he said, his voice rising. "This entire time you've been lying." "No," Gabrielle replied, her tone still measured. "I simply didn't correct your assumptions. You assumed I was nobody. You assumed your success was entirely your own. You assumed the company you worked for was independent of my family's holdings. I never confirmed any of that. You just never asked." Jennifer from Brand Strategy inhaled sharply, understanding dawning across her face. Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "So what, you've been playing some sick game? Testing me?" "Yes," Gabrielle said simply. "My grandmother left specific instructions in her will. I was to wait 5 years before publicly assuming control of Monroe Global Holdings. She wanted me to see who would love me without knowing what I had, who would support me without expecting credit, who would be a true partner. She paused, her eyes finally showing a flicker of emotion, not anger, but disappointment. You failed that test, Derek, not when you cheated, not when you dismissed my ideas or called me just a housewife. You failed the moment you stopped seeing me as an equal and started seeing me as an accessory to your ambition. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus Chen spoke carefully. Derek, as CFO, I've been asked to review your expense reports from the past 18 months. There are several concerning charges: luxury hotel rooms, jewelry, dinners, all billed to company accounts. Derek's face went pale. Those were client entertainment expenses. Except the clients you listed don't exist, Marcus continued, sliding another document across the table. Or they were double billed. We have security footage from several hotels showing you with Sienna Vale, not business associates. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting company assets, Gabrielle corrected. Assets that, as majority shareholder, I'm legally obligated to protect. Derek looked around desperately for an ally. Jennifer, you know my work. You know what I've built here. Jennifer avoided his eyes. Derek, your campaigns were good, but looking back at the records, she glanced at Gabrielle apologetically. A lot of your breakthroughs came after strategy sessions where Gabrielle's anonymous consulting firm submitted similar proposals. I just connected the dots this morning. What consulting firm? Derek demanded. Monroe Strategic Solutions, Julian Cross answered. A wholly owned subsidiary that Miss Monroe has been running from home for the past 7 years. Every major pivot this company has made, every successful campaign, every client relationship you thought you'd independently developed, it all originated from proposals her firm submitted. You were good at execution, Derek. But the strategy? That was always hers. Derek felt like the floor was dissolving beneath him. Every achievement, every award, every congratulatory dinner where colleagues had praised his vision, it had all been built on her invisible foundation. This is insane, he whispered. It's reality, Gabrielle said. The reality you refused to see because it was more comfortable to believe you were self-made. She turned to the rest of the board. Effective immediately, I'm assuming full executive control of Monroe Global Holdings and all its subsidiaries. Marcus will remain as CFO. Jennifer, I'd like to discuss your transition to VP of Brand Strategy. Your work has been excellent, and you deserve recognition. Jennifer's eyes widened. Thank you, Miss Monroe, Gabrielle continued, her voice steady and clear. As for Derek Whitmore, given the documented misuse of company funds and the ethical violations surrounding his relationship with an external influencer who received undisclosed compensation from company marketing budgets. Wait, what? Derek interrupted. Julian Cross opened another file. Sienna Vale received $47,000 in influencer partnership fees over the past 8 months, approved by you, despite no deliverable content and no signed contract. It appears to be a personal payment disguised as business expense. Derek's world was crumbling in real time, brick by brick. Your employment is terminated effective immediately, Gabrielle said without raising her voice. Security will escort you from the building. You'll have 1 hour to collect personal items from your office. Company property, including the laptop, phone, and corporate credit cards, will be surrendered now. Derek couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. 2 security guards appeared at the door as if on cue. You can't do this, he finally managed. I'll sue. You'll lose, Gabrielle said simply. My lawyers are very good. And Derek? The penthouse lease is in my name. The car service you've been using? My account. The club membership, the tailor, the wine cellar you're so proud of? All company benefits attached to a position you no longer hold. The security guards moved closer. Derek looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. The woman he'd dismissed as simple, as limited, as forgettable. She was looking back at him with the calm certainty of someone who'd always known her worth. I loved you, he said, his voice breaking. No, Gabrielle replied softly. You loved what you thought I could give you. You just never realized I'd already given you everything. As the guards escorted him out, Derek caught one last glimpse of the boardroom. Julian Cross was already presenting quarterly projections. Jennifer was taking notes. Marcus was nodding along to Gabrielle's vision for the next phase. The world was moving on without him, and the woman he'd underestimated was the one moving it. If Bree's quiet power speaks to you, if you've ever had to prove yourself twice as hard to get half the recognition, you're not alone. But what happens when the truth gets out? When the whole world finds out what Derek lost? Stay with us. The reckoning is just beginning. By noon, Derek Whitmore was a ghost. His office had been cleared, his access badges deactivated, his name removed from the company directory. He stood on the sidewalk outside Monroe Tower with a cardboard box containing a coffee mug, a stress ball, and a framed photo of himself at an award ceremony. The photo mocked him now. He was shaking hands with an industry leader, grinning like he'd earned every bit of that recognition. Behind him in the photo, barely visible, was Gabrielle, holding their infant daughters, smiling supportively. She'd been there all along, and he'd never even looked. His phone buzzed. Sienna. "Babe, how'd it go? Are we celebrating?" He couldn't bring himself to answer. Instead, he opened his banking app. The joint account he shared with Gabrielle, the one he'd planned to drain before the divorce finalized, showed a balance of $143.20. Everything else was gone. He called his personal account, frozen pending investigation of fraudulent activity. His credit cards declined. The corporate apartment where he'd been staying with Sienna, lease terminated. In the span of 3 hours, Gabriel had systematically dismantled the life he thought he'd built. His phone rang. His mother. "Derek, honey, I just got a very confusing call from HR. They're saying there's been a reorganization and our pension benefits need to be verified. Your father and I have been working at Monroe Strategic Marketing, the subsidiary, for 15 years. They're saying it's always been owned by Monroe Global Holdings. We had no idea. Did you know about this?" "Mom," he interrupted, his voice hollow. "I didn't know either. Monroe Strategic Marketing, the firm where I worked, where you and Dad work, it's all part of Monroe Global Holdings. And the owner is Gabrielle." "Gabrielle, your wife Gabrielle." "Ex-wife, yes. She inherited it from her grandmother 5 years ago, before we even got married." There was a long silence. "Derek, what have you done?" He couldn't answer. He just hung up. A Blacktown car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and Julian Cross looked out with an expression that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't cruelty either. "Mr. Whitmore, Miss Monroe asked me to ensure you had transportation. Where can I take you?" Derek almost laughed. Even in his destruction, she was showing him mercy he didn't deserve. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then I'll take you to a hotel. You have 1 night, company paid, to figure things out. After that, you're on your own." Derek climbed into the car, the cardboard box on his lap like a monument to his hubris. As they drove through Manhattan, Julian spoke quietly. "For what it's worth, you were good at what you did. You have talent, but talent without character is just performance. And eventually, every performance ends." "Did she send you to lecture me?" "No, I'm speaking as someone who watched Loretta Monroe build an empire from nothing. She taught Gabrielle that power isn't about controlling people. It's about controlling yourself. You lost control the moment you mistook her support for weakness." Derek stared out the window at the city he'd thought he'd conquered. "What happens now?" he asked. "That depends on you," Julian replied. "You can spend your energy being bitter, or you can spend it becoming someone worth rebuilding. But understand this, you'll never be part of her world again. That door is closed." They arrived at a modest hotel in Queens. Not luxury, but clean. Functional. "This is your stop," Julian said. Derek gathered his box and stepped out. Before the car pulled away, Julian called out, "Oh, and Mr. Whitmore, you should know. Sienna Vale called the building management an hour ago, asking about lease termination policies. She's seen the news. I suspect by the time you get back to the apartment, she'll have already cleared out her personal items. People who love money don't waste time when it disappears." The car drove away, leaving Derek standing on a street corner with everything he owned in a cardboard box. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Your severance paperwork is attached. 6 months salary, health insurance through the year. This is more than you're owed legally. Don't mistake generosity for weakness. GM." He opened the attachment. It was real. Despite everything, she was making sure he wouldn't be destitute. For the first time since that morning, Derek felt something other than anger or disbelief. He felt shame, not because he'd lost his job, not because he'd been exposed, but because he finally understood what he'd actually lost, a woman who would have stood beside him through anything, who had the power to destroy him but chose mercy instead, who loved him enough to test whether he deserved that love. And he'd failed so completely that even now, in his humiliation, she was still showing more grace than he'd ever shown her. He looked down at the photo in his box. Gabrielle, holding their daughters, smiling at a camera while he shook hands with someone more important. She'd never been in the background. He'd just refused to turn around. Across town, in her new office overlooking Central Park, Gabrielle Monroe sat alone for the first time since the meeting. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion and something she hadn't expected, sadness. Not for Derek, for the time she'd lost, for the version of herself who'd believed that love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Julian knocked softly before entering. "The press is asking for a statement." "Let them wait," she said. "How are my parents?" "Concerned, but proud. Your mother wants to know if you're eating." Gabrielle smiled despite herself. "Tell her I had a salad." "She won't believe that." "I know," Julian sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "You did the right thing. You know that, yes?" "I know I did the necessary thing. I'm not sure it's the same as the right thing." "Mercy and justice aren't opposites, Gabrielle. You gave him justice by holding him accountable. You gave him mercy by not destroying him completely. Most people only get one or the other." She nodded, but the weight of it all still pressed against her chest. "The twins?" she asked. "Your mother has them. They're having ice cream and watching Moana for the 40th time. Gabrielle laughed, the sound surprising her. "Maya's going to know every word soon." "She already does," Julian said with a smile. Then, more seriously, "What you did today, taking your place, owning your power, Loretta would be so proud." "Would she?" Gabrielle asked quietly. "Or would she tell me I should have walked away completely, that power isn't worth the cost?" "She'd tell you that power is neutral. It's what you do with it that matters. And you? You're using it to protect people who deserve protection and hold accountable those who don't. That's not cruelty. That's leadership." Gabrielle looked out at the city, the late afternoon sun turning the buildings into towers of amber and gold. Somewhere out there, Derek was beginning to understand what he'd lost. Somewhere else, Sienna was probably already lining up her next wealthy target. But here, in this moment, Gabrielle felt something she hadn't felt in years, clear. Not happy yet, not healed, but clear about who she was and what she was worth. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "The girls want to say goodnight to Mommy." A video call came through seconds later. Two beautiful faces filled the screen. Maya with her gap-toothed grin, Zara with her serious eyes. "Mommy," they chorused. "Hi, my loves. Did you have fun with Grandma?" "Ice cream," Maya announced proudly. "And Moana," Zara added, as if this was breaking news. Gabrielle felt her heart expand, pushing out the sadness. This was what mattered. Not the empire, not the revenge. These two small humans who loved her unconditionally, who would grow up knowing their mother never made herself smaller for anyone. "I'll be home soon," she promised. "We'll read stories before bed." "2 stories," Maya negotiated. "3," Gabrielle countered with a smile. After they hung up, she stood and gathered her things. Julian walked her to the elevator. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "Media interviews, investor calls. The whole world's going to want to know who Gabrielle Monroe really is." "Then I guess they're about to find out," she replied. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished brass. For the first time in 5 years, she recognized the woman looking back. Not Derek's wife, not someone's secret, not a test waiting to be graded, just Gabrielle Monroe, CEO, mother, legacy. The invisible woman had stepped into the light, and she wasn't going back into the shadows for anyone. Chapter 3. The headline hit at 6:47 a.m. just as dawn broke over Manhattan. Hidden Iris emerges. Marketing executive's wife revealed as billionaire CEO behind Monroe Global Holdings. By 7:15, it was trending on Twitter. By 8:00, her financial news networks were running the story on loop. By 9:00, Gabrielle Monroe's name was the most searched term on Google. The photo they used was from yesterday's board meeting. Someone had leaked it within hours. Gabrielle stood at the head of the conference table, commanding and composed, while Derek sat frozen in shock. The contrast was devastating. Power versus pretense, truth versus illusion. The media loved a narrative, and this one was irresistible. The underestimated wife who'd secretly owned the empire all along. The arrogant husband who'd thrown away a fortune for an Instagram influencer. The grandmother's test that revealed character. But nowhere in those headlines was the part that mattered most to Gabrielle. Her daughters, her purpose, her plan for what came next. She stood in her Brooklyn brownstone kitchen, Maya on her hip, watching the news coverage on mute while Zara played with blocks on the floor. "Mama on TV!" Maya pointed excitedly. "Yes, baby, Mama's on TV." Her phone had been ringing nonstop since dawn. She'd silenced it after the 40th call from reporters she'd never met, all wanting the exclusive story of her revenge. It wasn't revenge, it was just the truth finally wearing its own face. A text from Julian appeared. "Car service arriving at 10 a.m. Board wants full statement by noon. Investors are nervous. Also, your mother says to eat breakfast." Gabriel smiled despite the chaos. She texted back, "Tell the board I'll handle it. Tell my mother I had oatmeal." She won't believe the oatmeal lie. "I know." Another text, this one from her lawyer. "Derek's attorney called. He wants to negotiate custody arrangements. Says he's ready to step up as a father." Gabriel's jaw tightened. For 18 months, he'd barely acknowledged his daughters existed. Now that the world knew she was worth billions, suddenly he wanted to be a father? She typed back, "Schedule mediation. Document everything. I want this done right." At 9:30, her mother arrived to take the twins for the day. Patricia Monroe was 73, elegant, and possessed the same steel spine her mother Loretta had passed down through generations. "How are you holding up, baby girl?" Patricia asked, gathering Zara into her arms. "I'm fine, Mama." "That's what you always say." Patricia studied her daughter's face. "Your grandmother used to say the same thing. Fine is what strong women say when they're carrying the whole world and don't want anyone to know it's heavy." Gabrielle's eyes stung unexpectedly. "It is heavy." "I know." Patricia kissed her forehead. "But you're not carrying it alone. Your grandmother made sure of that. Julian's a good man. Trust him." "I do." "And those babies?" Patricia nodded toward Maya and Zara. "They don't need a perfect mother. They need a real one. So let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. Anger, sadness, relief, all of it's allowed." Before Patricia left, she pulled Gabrielle aside in the kitchen while the twins played in the living room. "Baby girl," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion, "I need you to know something." Gabrielle looked up from packing the twins' bag. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "When your grandmother told me about the test, about making you wait 5 years, I thought she was being cruel. I wanted to tell you about the inheritance right away. I hated watching you struggle, watching him treat you like you were less than." "Mama," but she was right. Patricia continued, "She knew that you needed to see who he really was, and she knew that you needed to discover your own strength without the safety net of money. I'm sorry I doubted her, and I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Gabrielle embraced her mother, both of them crying quietly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You took care of the twins when I had to rebuild. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Patricia pulled back, cupping her daughter's face. "You've always had it in you. You're a Monroe woman. We don't break, we build." Then she stood, dressed in a Navy power suit, and prepared to face the world. The Monroe Global Holdings headquarters was under siege. News vans lined the street, reporters jostling for position, cameras trained on every entrance. Inside, security had been tripled, and employees moved through the halls with the nervous energy of people who just discovered their quiet colleague was actually royalty. Gabrielle entered through the private executive entrance, Julian waiting in the lobby. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's do it anyway." He smiled. Loretta said the exact same thing before her first major press conference in 1979. They took the elevator to the executive floor, where the entire communications team had assembled. Press releases, talking points, interview requests from everyone from Forbes to Good Morning America. It was overwhelming. "We need to control the narrative," said Andrea Liu, the head of PR. "Right now, the story is, scorned wife gets revenge. We need to shift it to visionary leader emerges." "No," Gabrielle said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "We're not spinning anything. The truth is complicated enough without adding performance to it. Yes, I was married to an employee who didn't know I was the owner. Yes, that marriage ended badly. Yes, I chose to reveal myself now. But the story isn't about Derek. It's about what comes next." Andrea nodded slowly, impressed. "So what is the story about?" Gabrielle pulled out a folder she'd prepared. "It's about the Radiance Collective." She opened the folder to reveal mock-ups, business plans, and strategic frameworks for her wellness platform, the one she'd been building quietly for 2 years, specifically designed for women who'd been made invisible by the world. "This is what I'm announcing today," Gabrielle continued. "Monroe Global Holdings is launching a new division dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs, particularly women of color, who face systemic barriers to funding and recognition. The Radiance Collective will provide micro-grants, mentorship, and platform support." Julian was grinning. "Loretta would love this." "She'd say it's about time," Gabrielle replied. "I've spent 5 years watching and learning. I've seen which doors open easily and which ones stay locked no matter how hard you knock. It's time to build new doors." Andrea was already typing notes. "This is perfect. This shifts everything. You're not the scorned wife. You're the leader who's been planning this all along." "Because I have been," Gabrielle said simply. At 11:00 a.m., she stood before a room full of journalists, cameras, and recording devices. The press conference was being live-streamed globally. Somewhere, she knew, Derek was watching. So was Sienna. So were all the people who'd underestimated her. But she wasn't speaking to them. She was speaking to the women who'd been where she'd been. Invisible, dismissed, quietly powerful, but publicly erased. "Good morning," Gabrielle began, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Gabrielle Monroe, and I'm the CEO and majority shareholder of Monroe Global Holdings. Many of you have questions about how this happened, why I stayed silent, and what happens next. I'll answer what I can." A reporter from the Wall Street Journal raised her hand. "Miss Monroe, is it true you were married to a company employee who didn't know you owned the company?" "Yes. My grandmother, Loretta Monroe, left specific instructions in her will. I was to maintain anonymity for 5 years to understand who would support me for who I was, not what I owned. It was a test of character, both his and mine." "And your husband failed that test?" Gabrielle paused. "My ex-husband made choices that revealed he valued perception over partnership. But this isn't about him. This is about what I learned during those 5 years." Another reporter called out, "What did you learn?" "That power is most honest when it's hidden," Gabrielle replied. "When people don't know what you have, they show you who they really are. Some people loved me because of what they thought I could be. But the people who matter loved me for who I already was." A man from Bloomberg asked, "Are you seeking revenge against your ex-husband?" "No. Revenge would mean I'm still giving him power over my choices. I'm not. What happened yesterday was accountability. He misused company funds, violated ethical guidelines, and broke trust. Those are fireable offenses regardless of our personal relationship. The company I inherited from my grandmother was built on integrity. I'm simply protecting that legacy." If you've ever had to prove yourself twice as hard to get half the credit, if you've ever been called too emotional when you were just being honest, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, you're not alone. Gabrielle's standing in her truth now. But what happens when that truth reaches the people who dismissed her? Stay with us. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Gabrielle answered each one with the same measured grace, never defensive, never cruel, always truthful. Finally, she held up a hand. "I have one more announcement before we close." The room quieted. Today, Monroe Global Holdings is launching the Radiance Collective, a new initiative providing direct support to women entrepreneurs, particularly women of color, who face systemic barriers in business. We're committing $50 million in initial funding, with plans to scale to $200 million over the next 3 years. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. My grandmother built an empire when banks wouldn't loan her money because of the color of her skin and her gender, Gabrielle continued, her voice growing stronger. She taught me that power isn't just about what you accumulate. It's about what you build for the people coming after you. The Radiance Collective is my way of building doors that were locked when she was climbing. A reporter from Essence magazine stood, tears in her eyes. Miss Monroe, what would you say to women who feel invisible right now? Gabrielle met her eyes directly. I'd say you're not invisible. You're just surrounded by people who refuse to see. But that's their limitation, not yours. Keep building, keep creating, keep trusting your own vision, and when the right people finally look, they won't just see you, they'll wonder how they ever missed you in the first place. The room erupted in applause, not the polite golf claps of business press conferences, but genuine, moved applause. As Gabrielle left the podium, Julian fell into step beside her. That was perfect. That was true, she corrected. Perfect is performance. Truth is just truth. Across town, Derek Whitmore sat in his hotel room, watching the press conference on his laptop. His severance payment had posted that morning, 6 months' salary, more than he deserved, but it felt like monopoly money compared to what he'd lost. He watched Gabrielle command that room with the same authority she'd once used to edit his presentations at their kitchen table, the same intelligence she'd applied to his brilliant campaigns, the same vision he'd dismissed as cute ideas. She'd been extraordinary all along. He'd just been too blind to see it. His phone buzzed. Sienna. Did you watch? Oh my God, Derek, she's worth billions, billions, and you divorced her for me? He hung up without responding. Another call came through immediately. His mother. Derek, your father and I need to talk to you about something. His stomach dropped. What is it? HR called again. They're saying our pension benefits are being restructured under the new ownership. They're improving them. Adding healthcare coverage we didn't have before. Your father's medication costs will be covered now. Derek closed his eyes. Even in his betrayal, even after everything he'd done, Gabrielle was taking care of his parents. Why would she do that? His mother asked quietly. Because she's a better person than I ever was, Derek whispered. After they hung up, he stared at the ceiling of his generic hotel room. His entire life had been built on borrowed ground. Gabrielle's strategy, her connections, her silent support. And the moment he'd thought he could stand alone, the ground had simply returned to its rightful owner. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral. He opened it to find a courier with an envelope. Inside was a single document, a custody proposal drafted by Gabrielle's lawyers. It was remarkably fair, joint legal custody, a detailed visitation schedule that would allow him to rebuild a relationship with Maya and Zara, even provisions for his parents to maintain their relationship with their granddaughters. At the bottom, a handwritten note. The twins deserve to know their father. Whether you deserve to know them is something you'll have to prove. But I won't use our daughters as weapons. That's not who I am. G. Derek sat on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in his hands. The custody arrangement was attached to divorce settlement papers that had been delivered simultaneously. He scanned the financial terms with disbelief. No alimony demanded, no claim on his future earnings. The penthouse, which she owned, reverted to her. His severance package remained intact. A small trust fund established for Maya and Zara's education, funded entirely by her. Her only request, he cover his own legal fees. At the bottom, another handwritten note. This divorce isn't punishment, it's freedom for both of us. I'm not taking anything from you because you never had anything that was truly yours to begin with. Build your own life now. Prove to our daughters that growth is possible. G. Derek sat on the edge of the bed, the papers trembling in his hands, and for the first time in days, he cried. Not from self-pity, but from the crushing weight of understanding exactly how much grace was being shown to someone who'd shown none. She'd offered him partnership, love, family, and purpose, and he'd traded it all for the hollow validation of a younger woman's attention and a job title that had never really been his. By evening, Gabrielle Monroe was everywhere. her face on magazine covers being prepared for next month's issues. Her quote, "You're not invisible, you're just surrounded by people who refuse to see," shared thousands of times across social media. The Radiance Collective website crashed within hours from overwhelming traffic. Applications from women entrepreneurs flooded in faster than her team could process them. Gabrielle sat in her office, reviewing the custody proposal her lawyers had sent to Derek, when Julian knocked softly. "You should go home," he said. "The twins probably miss you." "I know. I just wanted to make sure the Radiance Collective rollout was smooth." "It's more than smooth. It's revolutionary." He sat across from her. "You're giving women what Loretta fought for: access, visibility, and someone in power who actually remembers what it's like to be powerless." Gabrielle smiled faintly. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I think you're doing what Loretta always hoped you'd do. Not just inherit power, but transform it into something that serves more than yourself." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" Gabrielle said finally. Anything. Do you think I should have told him sooner, before it got this far?" Julian considered this carefully. "I think you did exactly what you needed to do. You gave him every opportunity to be the man you hoped he was. He chose not to be. That's not your failure, it's his. And honestly, if you'd told him earlier, you'd never know if he stayed for you or for what you had." "I guess I know now." "Yes," Julian agreed quietly. "And knowing is better than wondering." Gabrielle's phone buzzed. Her mother. "The girls are ready for bed but refusing to sleep until they hear Mommy's voice." She smiled, the first genuine smile all day. "I need to go home." "Good," Julian said. "The empire can wait. Your daughters can't." As she gathered her things, Julian added, "For what it's worth, Gabrielle, I'm proud of you, not as a board member or consultant, as someone who watched you grow up. Loretta always said you had the strongest foundation of anyone she knew. Today, the world finally saw it." "Thank you, Julian. That means more than you know." The drive back to Brooklyn felt longer than usual, the streets clogged with evening traffic. But when Gabrielle finally walked through her front door and heard her daughter squeal, "Mommy," from the living room, everything else fell away. Maya and Zara crashed into her legs, both talking over each other about their day with Grandma, about the ice cream they'd negotiated for, about the park where they'd seen a dog that looked exactly like a bear. Patricia watched from the couch, smiling. "They've been waiting for you." "I'm here now," Gabrielle said, scooping both girls into her arms despite their growing weight. "I'm here." After her mother left, Gabrielle ran a bath for the twins, read them 3 stories instead of the promised 2, and tucked them into their matching toddler beds. "Mama?" Maya asked sleepily. "Why were you on TV?" Gabrielle smoothed her daughter's hair. "Because Mama has an important job, and sometimes people want to know about it." "Are you famous?" Zara asked, her eyes already half closed. "No, baby, I'm just me." "Good," Maya mumbled. "Famous people are weird." Gabrielle laughed softly. "Go to sleep, loves." She stood in their doorway for a long moment after they drifted off, watching their small chests rise and fall with peaceful breathing. These 2 perfect humans existed because she'd once believed in love, in partnership, in building something lasting. Derek had failed her, but he'd also given her Maya and Zara, and for that she'd always carry a complicated gratitude alongside the disappointment. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her open it. "I signed the custody papers. I'll do better. For them, if not for you. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but I am. D." Gabrielle stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Actions, not apologies. Show them who you can be." She didn't wait for a response. She simply set the phone down, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat on her small balcony overlooking the Brooklyn streets. The city hummed below, millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. Somewhere, Derek was beginning to understand what he'd lost. Somewhere else, women were reading about the Radiance Collective and daring to believe their businesses could matter. And here, in this quiet brownstone with her sleeping daughters and her grandmother's legacy finally claimed, Gabrielle Monroe felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness yet. That would come. but peace with who she was, what she'd endured, and where she was going. She raised her glass to the night sky, to her grandmother watching from whatever came after this life. "I did it, Grandma," she whispered. "I stood in the light, and I didn't burn." The city lights twinkled back like a chorus of agreement. The invisible woman had become undeniable, and the world would never overlook her again. 3 weeks later, Gabrielle sat across from Derek in a family mediator's office in Lower Manhattan. It was the first time they'd been in the same room since the board meeting, and the air between them was thick with everything unsaid. He looked different, humbler, quieter, like someone who'd been stripped down to studs and was trying to rebuild from the foundation up. He'd gotten a job at a small marketing firm in Brooklyn, one that had no connection to Monroe Global Holdings. He was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens and taking the subway like everyone else. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said quietly. "This isn't for you," Gabrielle replied, her tone measured but not cruel. "It's for Maya and Zara. They deserve to know their father." "I know I don't deserve—" "You're right, you don't," she held up a hand. "But what you deserve isn't the point anymore. What matters is what kind of father you're going to be moving forward. Can you show up consistently? Can you put them first? Can you love them without expecting credit?" Derek swallowed hard. "I want to try. I know I failed at being a husband, but maybe I can learn to be a good father." "Maybe," Gabrielle agreed, "but you're starting from zero. You have to earn every moment with them." The mediator cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the custody proposal from Miss Monroe's team. It's very fair, generous even. Mr. Whitmore, do you have any concerns?" Derek shook his head. "No, it's more than I expected." He looked at Gabrielle. "Thank you." She nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than forgiveness. As they signed the papers, Derek spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw the press conference. The Radiance Collective. It's incredible. You're incredible. I'm sorry I never saw it before." Gabrielle set down her pen and met his eyes. "You saw it, Derek. You just didn't want to acknowledge it because it meant you weren't the smartest person in the room. That's not blindness. That's choice." The truth of it landed between them like a verdict. "Can I ask you something?" Derek said after a moment. "You can ask. Did you ever really love me? Or was I always just part of the test?" Gabrielle considered this carefully. "I loved who you were when we met. The man who spilled coffee and missed his presentation because talking to me felt more important. The man who dreamed big but stayed humble. I loved him very much." "And when did you stop?" "When he stopped existing," she replied simply. "You became someone else. Someone who needed to be the hero of every story, even if it meant making me the background character in my own life. I couldn't love that person because that person didn't really love me." Derek nodded, tears gathering in his eyes but not falling. "I threw away everything that mattered." "Yes," Gabrielle agreed. "You did. But you're also getting a chance most people don't get. A chance to start over and do better. Don't waste it on regret. Use it to become the father your daughters need." They stood, the meeting complete. As Derek gathered his papers, he looked at her one more time. "For what it's worth, I hope you find someone who sees you the way you deserve to be seen." Gabrielle gave a small, enigmatic smile. "I already have. I see myself clearly now. Everything else is just extra." As she left the building, Julian was waiting by the car, as he always seemed to be. "How did it go?" he asked. "He signed everything. He'll see the girls starting next weekend," she replied. "And how do you feel?" Gabrielle paused, considering the question honestly. "Lighter, like I've finally set down something I was never meant to carry." Julian opened the car door for her, then slid into the seat beside her. "Your grandmother used to say that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about refusing to let their mistakes keep living rent-free in your heart." "Did she forgive the people who underestimated her?" "Eventually," Julian said, "but she never forgot. She just stopped letting it take up space that could be used for better things." As they drove through Manhattan, Gabrielle's phone buzzed with notifications. The Radiance Collective had just funded its first 10 entrepreneurs, women with brilliant ideas and zero access to traditional capital. Their stories were already being shared across social media, each one a testament to what happens when someone with power remembers what it's like to be powerless. "You're changing lives," Julian said, watching her scroll through the updates. "I'm opening doors," Gabrielle corrected. "They're the ones walking through them and doing the work." "Still," he insisted, "what you're building matters. Loretta would be so proud." Gabrielle looked out at the city she'd been born in, the city that had watched her be invisible and was now watching her shine. "I think," she said softly, "I'm finally proud of myself. And that matters more than anyone else's approval ever could." Julian smiled. "Now you sound like your grandmother." "Good," Gabrielle replied. "That means I'm on the right path." As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Gabrielle Monroe felt the final pieces of her old life fall away. What remained was solid, true, and entirely her own. The test was over. The empire was claimed. The invisible woman had become the architect of her own legacy. And the best part? She was just getting started. Chapter 4. 6 months had passed since the world learned who Gabrielle Monroe really was. In that time, the Radiance Collective had funded 127 women-owned businesses, launched mentorship programs in 12 cities, and become the standard-bearer for what corporate responsibility could look like when it centered those traditionally left behind. Gabrielle's face had graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Essence, not as a scandal, but as a visionary. But the transformation that mattered most wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet moments. Maya and Zara running through the Brooklyn brownstone she'd fully renovated, their laughter echoing off walls painted in colors she'd chosen herself. The community garden she'd started on her block, where neighbors gathered on Saturday mornings. The rhythm of a life built on her own terms, not in reaction to anyone else's expectations. And there was Julian. He'd been a constant presence since the beginning, professional at first, then gradually something more. They'd shared late-night strategy sessions that turned into conversations about art, music, and the weight of legacies. He'd shown up with soup when she had the flu, played blocks with the twins while she finished investor calls, and never once made her feel like she owed him anything for his presence. He simply showed up, consistently, quietly, the way real love was supposed to. On a crisp November morning, Gabrielle stood in her kitchen making pancakes, the twins' Saturday ritual, when her phone buzzed. Derek's name appeared on the screen. Over the past 6 months, he'd honored every custody agreement to the letter. Every other weekend, he picked up Maya and Zara from Gabrielle's brownstone and took them to his modest apartment in Queens. He'd learned to braid hair, poorly, but he tried, read the same bedtime stories 50 times without complaint, and started therapy to understand how he'd become someone he didn't recognize. The text was simple. "Girls had a great weekend. Maya lost a tooth. It's in the envelope with her clothes. Zara wants to tell you about the ducks we saw, dropping them off at 5. Gabrielle smiled despite herself. This version of Derek, humble, present, focused on his daughters rather than himself, was who she'd hoped he could be all along. It had just taken losing everything for him to find it. "Mama, phone down," Maya commanded from the table, syrup already on her chin despite not having pancakes yet. "Sorry, baby." Gabrielle set the phone aside and flipped the pancakes, perfectly, golden, the way her grandmother had taught her. The doorbell rang just as she was plating breakfast. Through the window, she could see Julian on the stoop, holding a bag from the bakery down the street and wearing that soft smile that made her chest feel warm. "Uncle Julian!" Zara shrieked, abandoning her seat to run to the door. Gabrielle opened it, and Julian swept Zara into his arms with practiced ease. "Good morning, little miss. I brought croissants." "We're having pancakes," Maya announced seriously. "Then I guess we'll have both," Julian replied, his eyes meeting Gabrielle's over Zara's head. "Good morning." "Morning," she said, trying not to notice how right he looked standing in her doorway, how easily he fit into the life she'd built. They'd been dancing around whatever this was for months, the lingering looks, the accidental hand touches, the conversations that went deeper than friendship, but stopped short of confession. Gabrielle wasn't sure if she was ready. Her divorce wasn't even finalized yet, though the papers were filed, and it was just a matter of time. But more than that, she was learning to be whole on her own, and she didn't want to rush into something new before she'd fully healed from something old. Julian seemed to understand this without her having to explain. He'd told her once, late at night over wine in her living room after the twins were asleep. "I'm not going anywhere, Gabrielle. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. But I'm not waiting like I expect something. I'm here because this is where I want to be." It was the most patient kind of love she'd ever encountered. After breakfast, Julian offered to take the girls to the park so Gabrielle could prep for Monday's board meeting. As she watched him walk down the street, one twin holding each of his hands, something in her chest expanded. This was what partnership looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but someone who showed up on Saturday mornings with croissants and didn't need credit for it. Her phone rang. Her lawyer. "Good news," Michelle said. "Derek's attorney confirmed he's not contesting anything. The divorce will be final by the end of the month." Gabrielle exhaled slowly. "That's good. There's something else. He wanted me to pass along a message." "What is it?" He said, "Tell her thank you. For the mercy. And for showing me who I needed to become for my daughters. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve their forgiveness." Gabrielle was quiet for a moment. "Tell him he's welcome. And that forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something you choose. He should focus on being present, not perfect." After they hung up, Gabrielle stood in her kitchen, in her home, in the life she'd built, and felt the final weight of her marriage lift. She'd loved Derek once. She'd grieved who he could have been. And now, finally, she was free. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, if you've ever wondered whether you could trust love again after betrayal, you're not alone. Gabrielle's learning that the right person doesn't just see your worth, they honor it. Stay with us to see how her story ends. 3 weeks later, the Radiance Collective hosted its first annual gala at the Museum of Natural History. The Great Hall glittered with hundreds of guests, entrepreneurs who'd received funding, investors who'd joined the mission, and women whose stories of resilience had become the foundation's heartbeat. Gabrielle stood near the Hall of Ocean Life under the massive blue whale, watching her vision come to life. Women in elegant gowns and sharp suits mingled, shared stories, and built networks that would outlast the evening. "You look happy," Julian said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "I am," she realized, surprised by the simplicity of the truth. "Your grandmother would be so proud of tonight." "I think she knew I'd get here eventually. She just had to make sure I found my own way." Julian smiled. "That was Loretta. She never gave you the answer, just the tools to find it yourself." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the party swirl around them. "Can I tell you something?" Gabrielle asked quietly. "Always. When Derek first left, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. I thought love was just another test I'd failed." Julian turned to face her fully. "And now? Now I think I was testing the wrong person." She met his eyes. "I spent so long trying to prove I was worth loving that I forgot to check if the person I chose was worth my love." "Gabrielle." "I'm not finished," she interrupted gently. "You've been patient with me. You've shown up without expecting anything in return. You've loved my daughters like they were your own, and you've never once made me feel like I owed you for your presence." She took a breath. "I don't know if I'm completely ready, but I know that I want to try, with you. If you still—" Julian kissed her. It was soft, reverent, and tasted like champagne and possibility. When they broke apart, he was smiling. "I've been waiting 6 months to do that." "I know," she said, laughing through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Thank you for waiting." "I'd have waited longer," he replied simply. "You're worth waiting for." Around them, the gala continued, but for a moment they existed in their own bubble. 2 people who'd found each other in the aftermath of loss and chosen to build something new. A photographer approached. "Miss Monroe, can we get a photo for the Foundation's social media?" Gabrielle glanced at Julian, who squeezed her hand. "Only if you're comfortable." She was. For the first time in years, she was completely comfortable being seen, not as someone's wife or secret or test, but as herself. They posed together under the blue whale, and when the photo was posted an hour later, the caption read, "Building something beautiful takes time, patience, and the courage to start over. Here's to new foundations. GM." The comments flooded in within minutes, hundreds of women sharing their own stories of rebuilding, of finding love after loss, of choosing themselves first. Later that night, after the gala ended and they'd said goodbye to the last guests, Julian drove Gabrielle home. The twins were with Derek for the weekend, another milestone in their co-parenting journey. "Do you want to come up?" Gabrielle asked when they reached her brownstone. "For coffee?" Julian smiled knowingly. "Is it actually for coffee?" "It's actually for conversation," she replied, "and maybe more coffee. I'm not ready for anything beyond that yet, but I'd like you to stay." "Then I'll stay." They sat on her couch, shoes off, comfortable in the quiet. Julian had brought his sketchbook. He was designing a community center in Harlem, and Gabrielle reviewed grant applications for the next round of Radiance funding. It was domestic and simple and perfect. "Can I ask you something?" Gabrielle said, setting aside her laptop. "Of course." "Why me? You could have anyone. Why wait for someone who came with so much baggage?" Julian set down his pencil and turned to face her fully. "You want the honest answer?" "Always." "Because I watched you become yourself," he said simply. "I watched you stand in a boardroom and reclaim your power without cruelty. I watched you show mercy to someone who didn't deserve it because you refused to let his betrayal change who you are. I watched you build something that serves others instead of just yourself." He reached for her hand. "You didn't come with baggage, Gabrielle. You came with depth. And I've been looking for depth my whole life." She kissed him then, slower this time, with the certainty of someone who'd finally stopped running from her own happiness. When they broke apart, she whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. They stayed up until 2 a.m., talking about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, dreams for the future. When Julian finally left, kissing her goodnight at the door, Gabrielle felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not for rescue or validation or proof of worth. Just hope for the simple joy of building a life with someone who chose her every single day. 1 year later, Gabrielle Monroe stood in the same museum hall where she'd kissed Julian for the first time. But tonight wasn't a gala. It was smaller, more intimate, a celebration of the Radiance Collective's 2nd anniversary. The foundation had grown exponentially. They'd funded over 400 businesses, launched a fellowship program, and partnered with 3 major universities to create curriculum around equitable entrepreneurship. But more than the numbers, it was the stories. Women who'd gone from invisible to thriving, who'd built empires of their own, who'd learned that their worth wasn't tied to who believed in them. Maya and Zara, now 2 years old, ran between tables in matching purple dresses, charming everyone they encountered. They'd just celebrated their 2nd birthday the week before, and the terrible twos were living up to their name, but in the most delightful way. Derek sat with his parents at a table near the back, not at the head table, not in the spotlight, but present. He'd continued therapy, maintained consistent co-parenting, and slowly rebuilt trust with his daughters. He'd even started dating someone, a teacher he'd met through a mutual friend, someone age-appropriate who challenged him to keep growing. When he'd told Gabrielle about her, she'd been genuinely happy for him. "Thank you," he'd said during one of their custody exchanges. "For not destroying me when you could have, for showing me there was another way." "I didn't do it for you," Gabrielle had replied honestly. "I did it for me, because I refused to let bitterness win." Now, watching her daughters dance with their father, awkwardly, sweetly, trying his best, Gabrielle felt the last piece of resentment dissolve. Julian appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about how different everything is now." "I'm better?" he asked. "So much better," she confirmed. They'd moved in together 3 months ago, not into her brownstone or his loft, but into a new space they'd chosen together, a home with room for the twins, for Julian's architecture studio, for the life they were building as a team. Patricia Monroe, now 79 and more vibrant than ever, clinked her glass from the stage. Age had only sharpened her wit and deepened her grace. She was proof that Monroe women improved with time. If I could have everyone's attention. The room quieted. 2 years ago, Patricia began, my daughter stood in front of the world and revealed who she'd always been. A leader, a visionary, a woman who inherited power and chose to transform it into purpose. Her voice wavered with pride. But tonight isn't about celebrating what she inherited. It's about celebrating what she built. Applause filled the hall. My mother, Loretta Monroe, used to say that the true measure of power isn't what you accumulate, it's what you leave behind. Gabrielle, baby, you're building something that will outlast all of us. Something that opens doors for women who've been locked out for too long. Patricia raised her glass. To my daughter, to the Radiance Collective, and to every woman who's ever been told she was invisible. May you find your light and shine so brightly the world has no choice but to see. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Gabrielle made her way to the stage, Julian's hand in hers until she had to let go to climb the steps. She stood at the microphone, looking out at faces that had become family. Entrepreneurs she'd funded, women she'd mentored, the community she'd built. 2 years ago, Gabrielle began, I stood in a boardroom and reclaimed my name. Tonight, I stand here having built something that matters more than any title or net worth, a community of women who refuse to stay invisible. She paused, finding Derek's face in the crowd. He was smiling, genuine and sad, and proud all at once. I've learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, mercy isn't naivety, and choosing yourself first isn't selfishness, it's survival. Her eyes found Julian's. I've learned that real love doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It shows up on Tuesday mornings and helps with homework and holds your hand through the hard parts without expecting credit. Julian smiled, his eyes glistening. But most importantly, Gabrielle continued, I've learned that you don't need anyone to see you for you to be extraordinary. You just need to see yourself clearly. Everything else is just confirmation of what you already knew. She raised her glass. To every woman who's been underestimated, overlooked, or told she wasn't enough, you are. You always were. And now it's time to build like you always knew you could. The applause was deafening. As Gabrielle stepped off the stage, Maya and Zara crashed into her legs. Mama, big stage, Maya shouted, pointing. Yes, baby, Mama was on the big stage, she laughed, scooping them both up despite their growing weight. Like Queen, Zara said seriously, her vocabulary still developing but her certainty absolute. Not a queen, baby, just me. Same thing, Maya declared with a certainty only she could muster. Julian joined them, and together they walked through the celebration, not as a scandal or a story, but as a family built on choice, honesty, and the courage to start over. Later that night, after the twins were asleep and the house was quiet, Gabrielle and Julian sat on their balcony overlooking Brooklyn. The city sparkled beneath them, alive with possibility. Do you ever regret it? Julian asked. The test? The 5 years of hiding? Gabrielle considered this. No, because it showed me exactly who people were when they thought I was powerless. And that knowledge, knowing who loves you for you and who loves you for what you can give them, that's worth more than any shortcut. Your grandmother was brilliant. She was, Gabrielle agreed. She knew that power reveals character, both in the person who has it and the people around them. Julian pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Gabrielle's breath caught. I'm not asking tonight, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know. I'm ready when you are. No pressure, no timeline, just whenever you're ready to say yes, I'll be here with this. He opened the box to reveal a simple, stunning ring. Emerald-cut diamond on a platinum band, elegant and understated, perfectly her. Gabrielle's eyes filled with tears. Julian, I love you, he said simply. I love your strength and your mercy and the way you rebuild things instead of burning them down. I love how you love your daughters and how you've honored your grandmothers. Legacy while building your own. I love that you chose to heal instead of harden. He closed the box gently. So whenever you're ready, a year from now, 5 years from now, whenever, I'll be here. Gabrielle kissed him, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized were falling. Ask me, she whispered. Julian blinked. What? Ask me now. I'm ready. Gabrielle, are you sure? I don't want you to feel... Julian Cross, she interrupted, laughing through tears. Are you really going to make me propose to myself? He laughed, opening the box again with trembling hands. Gabrielle Ann Monroe, will you marry me? Yes, she said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Like everything else with Julian, it was exactly right. They sat together on the balcony, her hand in his, the ring catching city light, and Gabrielle felt the final piece of her grandmother's test click into place. She'd been broken open by betrayal. She'd rebuilt herself with patience. She'd reclaimed her power with grace. And now, finally, she was choosing love from a place of wholeness rather than hunger. Thank you for waiting, she said softly. Thank you for being worth waiting for, Julian replied. Inside, Maya stirred in her sleep, calling out softly. Gabrielle stood to check on her, Julian following close behind. They stood in the doorway together, watching their daughters sleep, his by choice, hers by blood, theirs by love. This was the empire that mattered, not billions or boardrooms or headlines, but this, a home built on honesty, children who'd grow up knowing what real partnership looked like, and a love that chose to stay not because it had to, but because it wanted to. Gabrielle leaned against Julian's chest, his arms wrapping around her. I think my grandmother would be proud, she whispered. I know she would, Julian replied, because you didn't just inherit her legacy, you transformed it into something even more powerful. What's that? A life that's truly yours. As they stood together in the quiet of their home, the city humming below and their future stretching ahead, Gabrielle Monroe finally understood what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Power wasn't about control. It was about choice. The choice to know your worth, the choice to honor it, and the choice to build something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to break you. She'd been invisible once, but she'd never been powerless. And now, standing in the light she'd built herself, surrounded by love she'd chosen consciously, and daughters who'd grow up knowing their mother never settled, Gabrielle finally felt complete. Not because someone saw her worth, but because she'd finally seen it herself. And that was the only vision that had ever really mattered. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Monroe Cross Foundation headquarters sat in a renovated warehouse in Brooklyn, its glass walls overlooking the East River. Inside, hundreds of women worked on businesses they'd built with Radiant's collective support, a hive of ambition, community, and shared purpose. Gabrielle's office overlooked the main floor, a deliberate choice. She never wanted to be so high up that she forgot where she came from. Maya and Zara, now 7 years old, sat at a small table in the corner doing homework while Gabrielle finished a funding proposal. They'd just started 2nd grade, and already their teachers were commenting on their natural leadership abilities. They split their time between her home with Julian and Derek's apartment in Brooklyn, where he lived with his wife Sarah and their 1-year-old son. Co-parenting had become genuine friendship, not the friendship they'd had before, but something more honest. Derek had done the work to become someone worthy of his daughter's respect, and Gabrielle had done the work to forgive him, not for his sake, but for her own peace. Mama, Maya looked up from her math worksheet, Mrs. Chen said we have to write about a woman we admire for International Women's Day. Who are you going to write about? Gabrielle asked. You, both girls said in unison. Gabrielle's chest tightened. You don't have to write about me. You could choose Grandma Patricia or Great-Grandma Loretta or... We want to write about you, Zara insisted, because you show us that you don't have to be mean to be strong. And because you help other mamas build their dreams, Maya added. Gabrielle set down her pen and pulled both girls into her lap, no longer caring that they were getting too big for this. You know what the best part of my life is? She said softly. What? They asked. You too. Everything else. The company, the foundation, all of it. That's important. But you? You're everything. The office door opened and Julian entered, carrying takeout bags. Who's ready for dinner? Uncle Julian! Even at 7, they still sometimes called him that, a remnant from before the wedding 3 years ago when they were only 4. Dad, Gabrielle corrected gently. They were working on it. Dad, they amended, running to hug him. As Julian distributed containers of Thai food and the girls chattered about their day, Gabrielle looked around at the life she'd built, not perfect but real, not without scars but healed. Her phone buzzed, a text from Derek. Girls' spring concert is next Thursday at 7. Sarah and I will be there. Save us seats? She typed back, already on the calendar. See you then. It was strange how normal it had become, this blended family built from the rubble of a broken marriage. But maybe that was the point. Maybe rebuilding wasn't about erasing what happened, but about transforming it into something that served everyone better. Penny for your thoughts? Julian asked, sitting beside her while the girls ate. Just thinking about how far we've all come? Any regrets? Not one, she said honestly. That night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Gabrielle stood in her home office looking at the wall of photos. Her grandmother's original business license from 1974, the first Radiance Collective Grant Award, her wedding photo with Julian, Maya, and Zara's school portraits. A lifetime of choices documented in frames. Julian appeared in the doorway. Coming to bed? In a minute, I'm just remembering. He came to stand beside her, following her gaze. Remembering what? The woman I was 5 years ago. Standing in that elevator, leaving the penthouse with my babies, not knowing if I'd be okay. And I wish I could tell her, you're not just going to be okay, you're going to be extraordinary. Julian kissed her temple. She already was. She just didn't know it yet. Gabrielle turned to face him. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for letting me stay long enough to prove I was worth seeing too. They stood together in the quiet of their home. This home they'd built with intention, with patience, with the kind of love that didn't need to announce itself because it was woven into every ordinary moment. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with midnight traffic and distant sirens and millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. But inside, Gabrielle Monroe Cross was exactly where she was meant to be. Whole, healed, and finally home in a life she'd built with her own hands. The invisible woman had become undeniable, and the empire she'd built wasn't measured in billions or boardrooms. It was measured in the laughter of her daughters, the strength of her community, and the quiet certainty that she would never again make herself small for anyone's comfort. She had reclaimed her power, she had shown mercy without weakness, and she had learned that the greatest revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so completely yourself that the opinion of people who underestimated you simply stopped mattering. Gabrielle turned off the office light and took Julian's hand. Let's go to bed, she said. Best idea you've had all day, he replied with a smile. And as they walked down the hallway of the home they'd built together, Gabrielle whispered one final thank you to the grandmother who'd known exactly what she needed, not just an empire to inherit, but a test that would reveal who she'd always been, powerful, merciful, whole, and most importantly, free. Thank you for taking this journey with Gabrielle. If her story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up or learn to see your own worth when no one else did, share this story. Leave a comment about which moment touched you most. And remember, you were never invisible. The right people just hadn't learned to see yet. Subscribe for more stories about women who transform pain into power, who choose mercy without sacrificing strength, and who prove that the greatest empire you can build is a life that's authentically yours. Until next time, stand in your light. You've earned it.